No one reads thick books anymore, not because they're unintelligent, but because their attention's been shattered into 1,000 flashing pieces. Nearly 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, not because they're lazy, but because the system rewards survival, not foresight. The number of long-term investors is shrinking fast, replaced by gamblers chasing meme stocks, crypto spikes, and instant fortune. People aren't stupid. They've just been programmed to think in short bursts, trained to move without reflection, and punished for waiting. In a world designed to be fast, strategic thinking has become a liability. Patience is now seen as weakness. According to Microsoft's attention span study, human focus dropped from 12 seconds in 2000 to just 8 seconds by 2015. That's less than a goldfish. And no, it's not evolution, it's conditioning. We've built an environment that feeds on distraction, that floods the mind with signals and penalizes any moment of silence. Notifications are no longer tools, they are traps. Every buzz, every ping is a tiny leash pulling your mind toward urgency. We don't scroll because we're curious. We scroll because we're hooked. Our thoughts aren't drifting, they're being dragged. Everything is urgent, the news, the deals, the deadlines. Even the things that should take time are rushed to meet imaginary clocks. And in this chaos, something critical is lost. The ability to think beyond the next hour, the next hit, the next dopamine spike. The modern world doesn't need you to think long-term. It needs you reactive, exhausted, and distracted enough to never ask why. Because if you started thinking ahead, you might stop playing their game. You might stop buying what they sell. You might become inconvenient. That's why short-term thinking is not a flaw, it's a feature of the machine. The man who can't sit still won't challenge the system. He'll just keep running in circles thinking it's progress. He won't build, he'll consume. He won't invest, he'll chase. He won't plan, he'll scroll. And slowly, the architecture of his life collapses into fragments of unfinished thoughts and abandoned goals. This isn't a discipline problem, it's a design problem. We've created a culture that glorifies the immediate, monetizes your attention, and exploits your hunger for now. If you slow down, you're labeled unmotivated. If you wait, you're seen as weak. If you plan, they'll say you're out of touch. The truth is, the world no longer respects long-term thinkers. It fears them. Because a man who sees 10 years ahead can't be sold garbage today. A man who waits for real value doesn't fall for empty promises. A man who builds slowly is dangerous to a system that thrives on impulsive consumption. But today, we are raised inside a machine that doesn't just fear those men. It breaks them before they ever awaken. It breaks them with infinite scroll, with endless distractions, with the normalization of busy. You're not losing your ability to think long-term because of weakness. You're losing it because someone profits from your short-sightedness. And the more distracted you are, the less dangerous you become. Not to yourself, but to the people who built this game. And the most disturbing part is this: it's working exactly as planned. This loss of long-term thinking isn't a glitch in the system. It's the system working exactly as designed. And Machiavelli warned us about this 500 years ago. In The Prince, he wrote that a ruler doesn't need to be good. He only needs to keep people occupied with fear and short-term rewards. Not virtue, not truth, not vision, just distractions, carefully placed doses of panic and pleasure to keep the masses too busy to rebel. Because Machiavelli understood something that modern governments and corporations now exploit perfectly. People who don't think far ahead are easy to control. When you're trapped in the urgency of the next notification, the next bill, the next dopamine hit, you don't have space left to question power. You don't have time to ask where your life is going, why the rules feel rigged, or who actually benefits from your exhaustion. This is not accidental. This is a form of political sedation, where pleasure pacifies and fear motivates, but neither allows for reflection. A population driven by fear and dopamine doesn't need chains. They'll stay in line themselves as long as they feel temporarily safe or entertained. And that's the point. Short-term minds don't start revolutions. They start arguments online, chase trends, and cling to comfort like its purpose. They become excellent consumers, loyal workers, and forgettable citizens, all while believing they're making progress because they're busy all the time. A society that discourages deep thinking doesn't collapse. It becomes incredibly stable because no one's looking far enough to challenge its foundations. People who think long-term ask dangerous questions. What happens in 10 years? Who holds real power? Why does the game feel unwinnable? And those are the exact questions the system is designed to drown out with cheap rewards, noise, deadlines, and endless crises. That's why everything around you pushes immediacy. Buy now, click now, fear now, react now. Just don't stop and think. Because stillness breeds clarity, and clarity breeds rebellion. And rebellion doesn't mean chaos. It means stepping outside the role you were assigned. But a man caught in survival mode doesn't rebel. He complies, blames himself, and keeps running harder in a race designed to exhaust him. Machiavelli saw this clearly. You don't need truth to rule. You just need people who are too distracted or afraid to ask for it. And fear isn't always violence. Sometimes it's the fear of falling behind, not being enough, losing relevance, or missing out on the next big thing. That kind of fear is invisible, but it governs everything, from your spending habits to your self-worth, from your politics to your purpose. And it works because it's personal. It feels like your failure, not the system's design, so you never stop to question the architecture you're trapped in. The result is a generation that can't sit in silence, can't wait for value, can't resist urgency, because they were never taught how. They were raised to consume, react, obey, and perform, not to observe, plan, build, or dissent. And what remains is a culture that mistakes noise for meaning and motion for direction, forever spinning, never arriving. That's not freedom, that's containment, that's not growth, that's control. And the most terrifying part? The people running the show know exactly what they're doing. Because as long as you're thinking only about tomorrow, you'll never imagine a life beyond their system. If Machiavelli showed us how power works, modern neuroscience shows us how it hides. In apps, in screens, in the tiny chemical hits we now crave. The system no longer needs to silence you. It just needs to keep you busy chasing rewards that feel good but lead nowhere. Everywhere you turn, something is designed to trigger you. TikTok loops, flashing notifications, buy now, pay later banners that promise comfort and steal focus. These aren't conveniences, they're traps, engineered to hijack your attention and train your brain to crave the next micro hit of stimulation. What was once a survival tool, dopamine, has now been weaponized against you, conditioning you to seek what's fast, easy, and empty. Stanford psychiatrist Dr. Anna Lemke calls it plainly, overexposure to quick rewards is crippling the brain's ability to think long-term. Dopamine Nation, 2021. We've become dopamine junkies in a lab built by algorithms, twitching for novelty, chasing distraction, rewarding our own mental fragmentation. Pew Research, 2023 reports that 84% of American adults struggle to maintain focus without checking their phone, not once, but constantly. This isn't just distraction, this is erosion of patience, of clarity, of the cognitive endurance required to think 10 years ahead. Our culture doesn't merely allow this, it glorifies it. You're praised for being busy, responsive, always online, not for being thoughtful or slow. Try saying you want to take time to reflect, and you'll be seen as unmotivated, disconnected, maybe even falling behind. But what they call falling behind might be the only way forward, if what's ahead is just more noise, more speed, more burnout. In this system, the reactive are rewarded, quick with opinions, fast with decisions, plugged in 24/7, but never quite in control. The still, the ones who pause, question, observe, are ignored, sidelined, or labeled as outdated in a world obsessed with velocity. We teach kids how to scroll before they can read, and call that adaptation, not addiction, as if reaction is the new intelligence. But this isn't evolution, it's indoctrination into a mindset where slowness equals weakness and silence feels like failure. The result? A generation that can't wait, can't sit, can't build anything without craving instant payoff, even if it means sacrificing real purpose. The average person now switches between tasks nearly 300 times per day, and we wonder why long-term vision feels impossible. This is how the system works, by overstimulating you until focus becomes painful and presence feels impossible. And in that chaos, what thrives isn't truth or depth, but impulsivity, surface-level confidence, and the illusion of progress. You're not just losing your time, you're losing your tolerance for anything that doesn't gratify you immediately. And worse, the culture applauds it. Multitasker, trendsetter, hustler. We've rebranded addiction as ambition. We don't reward the builder who thinks 10 years out. We reward the reactor who goes viral for 10 minutes. But here's the secret no one tells you. The ability to sit with discomfort, to delay gratification, to resist the urge to click is power. Because the man who can wait is the man who can see. And the man who can see is the one they fear most. He's not seduced by speed, not pulled by panic, not driven by artificial urgency. He chooses what matters and lets go of what doesn't. Stillness isn't passivity, it's precision. And in a world where everything screams for your attention, choosing where to look is the most radical act. Because when you stop reacting to everything, you finally start responding to what's real. In a world obsessed with dopamine, noise, and applause, Marcus Aurelius offered something far more dangerous: the ability to feel whole without external permission. He wasn't just a Roman emperor. He was a man at the peak of power who chose discipline over indulgence and stillness over reaction. "Do not let your soul be pulled by externals," he wrote. "Mastery of the self is the highest power." And in that one line, he exposed the weakness of everything our modern world celebrates: neediness, restlessness, and the addiction to being seen. Because a man who needs applause will always serve the crowd, and a man who needs stimulation will never master his own attention. But Marcus didn't need praise to stay grounded, and that made him unshakable, not just as a ruler, but as a human being. In today's world, most men are trained to be responsive, available, emotionally reactive, and constantly plugged into every stimulus around them. That's not power, that's slavery, masked by convenience, disguised as ambition, and sold as hustle culture to keep you chasing what never satisfies. Stoicism flips that entirely. It doesn't ask you to run harder, it dares you to stop, to watch, to choose, instead of react. The Stoic doesn't panic when others do. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't beg for comfort. His power is internal and therefore untouchable. In a system designed to bait your every impulse, the Stoic becomes immune, not by withdrawal, but by self-command. He's not cold. He's not numb. He simply sees the trap for what it is and chooses not to step into it. And that's the power no system can commodify. The power of enough. The power of restraint. The power of deliberate silence. The Stoic isn't driven by outrage or urgency. He doesn't need to win every argument or prove his worth every day. He understands that most noise is bait, most praise is manipulation, and most urgency is manufactured to distract him from what matters. So he trains differently, He doesn't build speed, he builds stillness, the kind of stillness that can hold the weight of a real vision. Because clarity doesn't come from reacting fast. It comes from seeing clearly, choosing slowly, and moving only when the direction is true. And in that way, Stoicism is the ultimate long-term mindset, not just for thinking ahead, but for thinking free. If the Machiavellian world rewards obedience and punishes depth, the Stoic rewrites the rules by not playing for their rewards at all. He sees that the game is rigged, but instead of complaining, he sharpens his mind until he no longer needs the prize they're offering. Marcus didn't need power to feel powerful. He didn't need luxury to feel fulfilled. He didn't need more, he needed less. That's why he was feared. That's why he was free. And that's why his words still matter, centuries after every empire he ruled turned to dust. Because the man who can delay gratification, master his attention, and act from principle is the man who cannot be moved by manipulation. He becomes the anchor in chaos, the quiet force in a loud world, the calm mind in a culture trained to chase noise. And in a world that monetizes your impulsiveness, the ability to pause is no longer passive, it's revolutionary. Because the moment you stop chasing rewards is the moment you become immune to control. And in that moment, you remember what Marcus remembered, that true power is not what you own, but what you no longer need. You've been told the system is broken, but that's the comforting lie. The truth is harder to swallow. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended, because a broken system collapses, but this one profits. It scales, it multiplies, not in spite of your exhaustion, but because of it. Start with education. It doesn't teach you how to think. It teaches you how to comply, memorize, obey, and regurgitate someone else's answers under pressure. You're taught how to complete tasks, but never how to build a vision, ask real questions, or reject bad systems. School rewards correctness over creativity, urgency over understanding, and performance over purpose. And we call that preparation for life. But what kind of life are we really being prepared for if we graduate knowing formulas but not ourselves? Then comes consumer credit, the financial arm of manipulation, designed to monetize your impatience and punish your discipline. You're encouraged to buy now, pay later, repeat forever, not because it's freedom, but because it keeps you dependent, leveraged, and quietly afraid. No one rewards the man who saves. No one celebrates the one who waits. But miss a payment and suddenly the system notices. Delayed gratification builds power. And that's exactly why it's been erased from our culture, ridiculed, or rebranded as boring. Then there's content, short, addictive, infinite, engineered to reset your brain every 10 seconds until deep thought feels physically painful. The more you scroll, the less you reflect. The more you consume, the less you question. The more you react, the less you resist. And that's the point. Because a distracted mind can't form a long-term strategy. It doesn't challenge the rules. It just plays faster. So what's the result of all this? You don't know who you'll be in 5 years because the system trained you not to care. You don't save because you've been taught that future you is someone else's problem, someone weaker, someone less important than the dopamine now. You give up when things don't pay off immediately. Not because you're lazy, but because you were conditioned to expect rewards before wisdom. And while you're busy chasing stimulation, failing to plan, and questioning your own willpower, they win. They sell you what you don't need. They shape your behavior without you noticing. They sleep peacefully, knowing you'll never pause long enough to rewrite the rules. Because tired people don't revolt. Distracted people don't strategize. And reactive people never reclaim power. They only beg for relief. That's the real design, not to kill you, but to keep you too numb, too busy, and too uncertain to ever become a threat. They don't want you dangerous. They want you dependable. They want you stuck in cycles you call normal, goals you call success, and apps you call connection. And every time you try to break free but can't, you blame yourself, not the system. That's the final trick. They convince you the cage is your fault and then sell you a meditation app inside it. But make no mistake, this isn't chaos, it's choreography, and you've been dancing to their rhythm since the day you were taught not to ask why. The good news? Once you see the pattern, you can step out of it. But you'll need something most people lost long ago: the courage to stop and think for yourself. If you've come this far, you already feel it. That dull ache behind your ambition. The quiet voice asking if this is really how life was meant to be. And now that you've seen how deep the system runs, you know the answer isn't to move faster. It's to step outside and see it clearly. You don't need another productivity hack or morning routine. You need discipline that's not for performance, but for protection against manipulation. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to make people feel better. He wrote to make himself stay awake inside a world built to distract and seduce. He wasn't chasing pleasure. He was fighting for presence, for mental sovereignty, for the ability to think clearly when everyone else had sold that right. Because once you see the game, the only way out is to stop playing on their terms and start training your mind to resist their rhythm. You won't need hype. You'll need structure, not more motivation, but more silence, fewer choices, and deeper focus that isn't driven by dopamine. Start with 30 minutes each morning, no phone, no screen, just paper, a pen, and the question, where am I headed and who is deciding that path? Then each day, do one thing that builds your future but gives you no pleasure right now. Read 10 difficult pages, invest without reward, build without attention. Train your nervous system to crave results that take time, because that's the only kind that can't be taken from you. Turn off every notification that doesn't save your life. Delete every app that sells you speed in place of depth. Rethink your environment like it's a battlefield, because it is. Your attention is not a resource, it's your lifeline. Guard it like your sanity depends on it, because it absolutely does. Every small resistance to urgency is a victory. Every moment you delay gratification is a return to power. Every time you choose silence over stimulation, you sharpen your vision. This isn't self-help. This isn't about optimizing your day. It's about reclaiming your autonomy from systems that profit when you forget who you are. The modern world wants you fast, predictable, emotional, and overwhelmed, because that version of you is easy to sell to and easier to control. But when you stop chasing cheap rewards, you begin to remember what lasting satisfaction feels like, the kind that doesn't come from a screen or sale. Marcus said, "The greatest wealth is the ability to live without being enslaved by desire." He wasn't being poetic, he was being precise, because the man who doesn't need is the man who can't be bought. The man who can sit in discomfort is the man who can't be led by pleasure. And the man who builds slowly, quietly, deliberately is the one who shapes a future others are too distracted to even imagine. If you want to think differently than the crowd, you must live differently than the crowd. Not louder, just deeper, just slower, just freer. You will be misunderstood. You will be mocked, but you will not be owned. Because the first step to escaping the game is to remember this one truth. What makes you dangerous is not how loud you roar. It's how silently you refuse to be tamed.